Welcome, everybody, to an historic episode of Two Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin, your guide through what was truly an amazing day at the White House, where President Trump met with the Ukrainian leader, Mr. Zelensky, and a number of European leaders from NATO and from the key allies there. Two ways I think about what happened: the symbolism and kind of the theatrics of it, which were incredible, and then there's the substance, and we'll talk about it all. Our guest today is Clifford May, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, longtime national security figure, and then an even longer time national security figure. Morton H. Halperin, veteran diplomat. It says here statesman. I guess I'll go with that. My dad, who served in the Johnson administration, the Nixon administration, worked with Madeleine Albright at the State Department, and has a wealth of experience in all of what's going on. These are complicated issues, and we'll talk about them. And then, of course, as always, we'll take your questions and comments. Please, if you want to be in on the conversation, raise your hand. If you're here on the two-way platform, raise it high. We'll get to you in a moment. We're going to probably spend most of the show, probably all the show, talking about Ukraine. So again, welcome your participation. If you're watching on X or YouTube, please do not raise your hand. Also, think about peace, love, and understanding in that order. No smack in the chat. Grateful to you all for being part of the two-way community. Also grateful to Cozy Earth, one of our sponsors. I have been spending my summer wearing Cozy Earth stuff, and it's incredible. It's made from viscose from bamboo. It will wick away heat and moisture from you, keep your body several degrees cooler. Their sheets, their t-shirts, their pants. I've told you this before. I just basically wear the pants. It's all I wear all summer. They're casual. They fit very comfortably, but they're also nice enough. Nothing I've been invited to this summer where I couldn't wear the pants. They're great. Their sleepwear, also been sleeping on that all summer here in the summer heat. There's a 100-day free trial. You can try them during these hot days of the end of summer. And if you don't like them, you can send them back, but you won't want to. And if you do keep them, they come with a 10-year warranty on all their bedding products. That is 10 years of cool, comfortable sleep. So I recommend all that to you. And I also recommend this. You go right now to cozyearth.com and use the code two-way. You get 40% off sheets, pajamas, and more. It will be the best thing you ever purchased. And I'm looking forward to wearing it in the fall too. But so far for summer, they've been extraordinarily good. So sleep cooler, lounge lighter, stay cozy with Cozy Earth. All right. Again, grateful to our sponsors, grateful to you. As I said, the White House today was filled with pomp and circumstance and filled with substance. And I think on the substance, what we know today is that President Trump said publicly what had been talked about on background and to some extent by his top aides over the weekend on the Sunday shows, which is the United States is committed to playing a role in helping secure a peace to keep the Ukrainians secure and safe if there is some sort of deal. And that's big because you wouldn't necessarily have expected that. And that is contrary to the fears that a lot of Europeans had. On the mood music of the thing, on the theatrics, the day was filled with moments of bon ami and comity between the two presidents, President Zelensky and President Trump. And as I tweeted earlier today, Zelensky may have been a second-rate actor, but he learned his lines well. Throughout the day, this was the opposite, 180 degrees different from his last turn in the Oval Office. The Oval Office was filled when Zelensky was there before the president met with the European leaders and Zelensky, filled with pretty much every applicable member of the cabinet. A lot of pressure, a lot of press in there. The president and Zelensky took a ton of questions, but from the greeting where there was jokes about Zelensky not wearing an old T-shirt or sweatshirt, but a nice jacket, not a tie, but a nice jacket, to their time in the Oval, to their time in the subsequent photo op and Q&A with the Europeans, there was seeming warmth between them. And Zelensky was so careful about how he answered every question. There was no mistaking that he had been briefed, he had thought it through, and he didn't want to say anything to create the impression that he was ungrateful to the United States or President Trump, didn't want to say anything that would be potentially problematic. And there was a sense of solidarity, not just between them, but between them and the Europeans. And so for those critics of Friday who thought that the president was leaning so far for Putin, today was very warm. And amongst the smart things Zelensky did, he presented the president with a letter from the First Lady of the United States, or for the First Lady of the United States, from the First Lady of Ukraine, playing off of Melania Trump's letter that she had the president deliver to Putin about her concern for the children in the region. So if you're someone who wants a unified front with the United States supporting Ukraine, Europe supporting Ukraine, and no distance between them, this was a good day for you. So let's bring in our guests and start running through some of the extraordinary sound from this day and pictures. Truly, as often happens with Donald Trump, this was a day unlike any I've seen in a White House for a variety of reasons, and you'll see that from the video. So let's bring in our guests. First, Dr. Halperin. Dad, what administrations you serve in? You were in the Johnson Pentagon. You got on mute first. Johnson Pentagon, Nixon White House. You got on mute. You still got on mute, Dad. There you go.
I was in the Johnson Pentagon, Nixon White House NSC staff. And then the Clinton administration, I did a trifecta. I was first in the Defense Department, then I was on the NSC staff, and then finally I was in the State Department. So you could say I couldn't hold the job, or that everybody wanted me.
Or either way. And you didn't work in the Obama administration,
I
right?
actually got my only formal presidential appointment from Obama. I was appointed by him to be a member of the board of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Served on that board for about 7 years in both the Clinton and the Obama administrations. The Obama and Trump administration.
Right.
And got a presidential appointment from Obama, and confirmed by the Senate in that position.
And you've got tons of experience dealing with issues like this in Kosovo and elsewhere, of complicated European conflicts that need to be brokered by the U.S.
And like this particular one, I was in the Pentagon working for Wes Aspin when the Soviet Union fell apart, and we had the question of how do we persuade the Ukrainians to give up the nuclear weapons which they inherited when the country fell apart. And I persuaded Aspin that he should personally go to Ukraine and personally assure the Ukrainian government that the American government was serious when it committed itself to providing support for Ukraine if it was attacked after it gave up its nuclear weapons. All right, so that's my most intimate
connection to Ukraine. All right, Dad, thanks for being here. I like so much about Cliff May, who's going to tell us about his resume in a minute. But what I like is that he was on with my dad once before, and Cliff has soulful eyes, and I can just see in his eyes and his smile his appreciation for my dad, which touches me greatly. So, Cliff, welcome in. Thank you for being back, and tell folks again what's your experience in accumulating your national security experience.
You know, I spent more than 20 years as a journalist, probably most notably as a New York Times foreign correspondent, Washington correspondent, a lot of different parts of the world, Africa, Russia. I started going to Russia. Well, my first time in Russia, I was a teenager in 1969, and I went to the Russian Institute at Columbia. I was an exchange student, an early exchange student at Leningrad State University. In fact, I overlapped with Putin while I was there. And people say, well, did you know Putin there? And all I can say is I got drunk with a lot of guys named Volodya, so it's entirely possible, but I can't actually prove it. As I remember, everybody had hair, but I don't know if he had lost it at that point yet. And then after the events of 9/11, I founded, with some help from Jeane Kirkpatrick and Jack Kemp, a think tank on national security, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And a lot of what we focus on are the most endangered democracies, most endangered free nations in the world. Ukraine, which is at war trying to preserve its independence, its freedom, its sovereignty. Israel, which is at war with various groups that want its extinction. We worry and spend time in Taiwan because the Communist Party of China wants to subjugate the people of Taiwan. And then there's South Korea. And I worry about South Korea more now than I have. Why? Because Kim Jong-un, the dynastic dictator of North Korea, has been giving Vladimir Putin weapons and soldiers, and he's getting something in return. And what he's getting in return, I think, will make South Korea more vulnerable, more endangered, as well as Japan, as well as American forces in places such as Guam. So there are four most endangered democratic societies, and I should just say four, we call at FDD the axis of aggressors, and that's Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang, and they are in an increasingly close and dangerous anti-American alliance, and we need to recognize that, and I think see it as a Cold War, and a much more challenging Cold War than the one that we fought against the Soviet Union. And I'll tell you one more thing: if we think that we won the Cold War, that's true. If you define the Cold War as a fight against the Soviet Union, if you think of it as a fight against communism, the most powerful communist party in history exists right now in Beijing, and as I said, it has some formidable energies, two of which, like Communist Party of China, have nuclear weapons.
So grateful to have you both here. To paraphrase my favorite John F. Kennedy joke, more foreign policy experience ever gathered in one place, with the possible exception of when Condi Rice dined alone. So honored to have you both here. So we're going to run through the day and get you two to comment on stuff. And again, a lot of this is pomp and symbolism and humanity as opposed to substantive changes, but it's important. So we'll run through that. And then again, we'll take your questions. If you want to get in the conversation as part of the community, please raise your hand. Let's start with the greeting. Number one, this is President Trump greeting Zelensky at the White House door. And you'll notice, I think we'll see here, there's a focus on President Trump's pleasure at the dress of his counterpart. Number one, please. 32.
We love them. We love that. Thank you very much, everybody.
A lot of warmth there, and again, so different from last time. Here they are in the White House. There's a photo, number two. This is the two of them in the Oval Office looking at a map. Again, body language says it all. Here's the president. Let's see. This is number six. This is the president expressing his optimism that they can reach an agreement. Number six.
The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions, President Putin.
Okay, Sam, you can jump out of that.
Also,
number seven now, please. This is Zelensky expressing his pleasure with the conversation.
Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
very good.
And it really was the best one. Maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points.
Okay. We'll look at some more, but gentlemen, I want to bring you in and ask you your thoughts. Dad, you first. The importance of the warmth between them. Is that just something for commentators to comment on, or does it matter here?
Well, I think a bully has discovered that you can't bully everybody. And when somebody is not a bully and stand up to you, that the only way to deal with them then is with kindness and with cooperation. It's an extraordinary change. And I think it was a result of how tough Zelensky stood when he was treated, in my view, outrageously in the Oval Office.
Cliff.
Look, I think it's good to see good relations between them. We know President Trump puts a lot of stock into good personal relations with other leaders. but as you said, I think suggested earlier, Mark, that this is not the substance. It's the mood, and that's good, and that's helpful. But we don't know about the substance, and there's plenty that I have to say that I'm concerned about that we just don't know at this point. But again, I'd rather see them getting along than what we saw at the last meeting.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead, Dan.
Even in that, there was some substance. I mean, President Trump suggested that he was prepared to participate in some form in providing security guarantees to Ukraine, which is, as far as I know, a major change and a very important step.
It is, but more, I'm curious to know what you think that means, because I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think it doesn't mean American boots on the ground, and I'm not arguing that it should. We had some security guarantees in the past, such as in the Budapest memo, where we and the Russians and the British said we all guarantee the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and that didn't come to pass. So I worry if it's going to be only a piece of paper. I don't know what he means. I'm just kind of curious to know what you think.
Go ahead, Dan.
They're also talking about other things like stationing NATO troops
or non-NATO but NATO members like France and Britain.
And that would be a big deal.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that point. And this has been reported now for about a week that the British and maybe the French are willing to put. I'm amazed at how little coverage that's gotten. That seems to me to be more significant than if what the U.S. is talking about is air intelligence, selling arms to the Ukrainians and the British and the French. Right. Has that happened?
No.
In post Cold War, has any Western European country put troops in another country to deter Russian aggression? Does that happen?
Members of NATO.
Where has it happened?
In Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia.
Well, sorry, to be clear, has it happened without American troops on the ground? Have they done it unilaterally?
There are no American.
What troops are in Lithuania? British?
I don't.
No, we had American troops. We had American troops in the Baltics. My son, who is, I'm proud to say, as a Ranger Tab paratrooper, spent 3 months in Latvia after the invasion, after Putin invaded Ukraine. It was NATO forward deployment saying, "Don't come in here."
Just to be clear,
right.
Just to be clear,
British and French would be very different.
British and French unilaterally, not under NATO. I don't think that's happened. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think.
No,
I
don't think so. Not under NATO.
Yeah, but that seems pretty significant because for one thing, if it's under NATO, America's involved directly, right? We're talking here about some weird hybrid, which Cliff is right. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but for the British and the French to do that seems to me to be key to this whole deal and unprecedented.
Well, but also think that the Russians will accept that as part of the deal, because part of what the Russians have been trying to do is to get Ukraine to commit itself not to allow the stationing of troops from NATO.
That to me, and again, this started leaking out on Friday. That to me is and I know Cliff has concerns about the unknowns and want to talk about them, but that to me is the only, and I said this morning on the morning meeting, that to me is the piece of the deal that's different than what everybody's been talking about. And I assume the president of the United States has some reason to believe Putin will accept that because they're going around now saying that's part of the deal. So Cliff, can you see a world in which Putin would accept British and French troops in Ukraine?
Yes, but here's what I fear. If you were to, and this gets back to the conversation we had the last time we met, and it's one thing to kind of breeze the conflict along the lines of contact, which again is not ideal, but I would say it would be a move forward. What we believe that Putin wants is not only everything he's conquered, but a lot more, most of Donbass, things he hasn't yet conquered. And most concerning to me is what's called the fortress barrier. It's a line that's where the Ukrainians are very well dug in and where the Russians have not been able to penetrate further. If they were to give that up, and you were to say, okay, we'll replace that with French and British troops, do we trust that Putin wouldn't try to break through and hope that the troops would simply fade away? I think it's very hard for Zelensky to give that up. But you could see Putin saying, yeah, put some Russian and French troops there, and then find a way
British.
to go through and penetrate further and figure that the truth. Like you look at UNIFIL, for example, in Lebanon, it was there to make sure that Hezbollah didn't rearm, and of course it didn't do so. Now that's the UN, and UN troops, I'm afraid, peacekeepers do very little that's useful. But I think it would be dangerous for the British and the French to do more than say we're watching and to say we're going to keep the Russians from penetrating. Would they not fade away? Does Putin not think they'd fade away? This all worries me. I don't think, but I think you're absolutely right. And it's a good thing for the French and the British to say we're willing to come in there and maintain an armistice of some sorts. And I think that's what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, Dad.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good thing that they must think that the Russians will at least stay in the same room when they start talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And it's open to a discussion. And
Yeah.
at that point, the issue becomes what the Ukrainians, in my view, what the Ukrainians want to do. I could imagine the Ukrainian people deciding that the war has been horrible, that they need to stop fighting, and that a guarantee survival of much of their country is something they have to accept now. People have done that in the past. They've given it up. And if they choose to give it up, that's their choice.
Yeah.
That's totally different than the Americans or the Europeans saying to Ukraine, you accept this, and if you reject it, we'll cut off your military equipment. If we leave it to them as something that if they choose to do, we will support them in every way that we can, then I think it may well be a step forward in a way to resolve the conflict.
Let me play you
that's right.
the General Secretary of NATO. How do you pronounce his last name? Mark
Rutte.
Here's Mark Rutte, number 8, thanking the president for breaking the deadlock.
Thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock basically with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call. And from there, we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial.
All right, let me make one point and then ask you both a question. It seems to me that there's never going to be a deal that Putin loves and Ukraine loves, right? They're both going to have to sacrifice something. And that one of the things the president has done very well, even though he claimed sarcastically he would do it on the first day, is he's created an atmosphere of you don't like this deal, but the alternative is endless war, more killing. And so you're gonna have to take something that's imperfect. Don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. It may not work, but we didn't have this under the Biden administration. There was no moment under the Biden administration when there was an opportunity to be seized to end the war, and that's what President Trump's created. Now, if you look at the coverage of the last 2 weeks, there was all this worry that Europe and the United States were not in sync, that the president was more pro-Putin than Europe. And then you see constant coordination on Wednesday of last week before the Friday summit. And then today, this extraordinary spectacle. Obviously, the Europeans, like Zelensky, know they're reliant on Donald Trump here. So they may not be able to say all they think. But here's my question, Dad, you first. It seems to me that the Europeans and the United States now are in sync. I don't really see any difference between what they're going for. Am I right about that, or are there still some differences?
Well, what we don't know is what they would say to the Ukrainians about whether we hope you will take this deal seriously, or you must take it because if you don't, we will cut off military aid to you. And that may be a point. Trump obviously seems to think he's cut off military aid in the sense that he's allowed the Europeans to buy it, but he no longer thinks he's providing any of it. But there's still the question of whether the United States is leaving on the table, saying to the Russians, if you don't buy this deal, that is to allow British and French troops and other forms of security guarantees, including some role for the United States, if you don't buy this deal, then we'll cut off, the aid to defense support for Ukraine? And that's the question we don't know the answer. Obviously, the Europeans are hoping that they have a deal with Trump, and they may have some understanding with him, and it's in their interest to move forward and see whether he will deliver and whether they can all deliver Putin to provide some serious assurances that he will not start the war up again 3 years from now.
Cliff, same question.
Go ahead. You want? Yes,
well,
I would
same
say.
Question. Is there?
Yeah.
Do you see daylight between Europe and the United States right now?
They're singing the same tune. I don't know if the lyrics are exactly the same, and I'm not sure we do know until we hear what it is that Trump is advising Zelensky, advising the Ukrainians to give up in terms of land. Again, this fortress belt, that's the right phrase I should have used. The fortress belt is something that I don't think it's easy. Look, if it were a matter of saying, you know what, give up your Crimea, you know the Russians want Crimea. It's their naval base. You just got to give up Crimea. That's one thing. Even if you say the land they've conquered, you're not getting back anytime soon. That would be one thing too. If they have to give up the fortress belt, which prevents penetration later, that's something different. And that would be very hard for Zelensky to give up, and hard for I think the Europeans to go along with.
Right. But we're going to get to your questions in just a second, so please raise your hand if you want in. I take out your point, but here's what's confusing to me, an amateur. They're meeting today, like, even though they're not saying everything publicly, presumably if there were some big difference now, they wouldn't necessarily be going along the way they're going along.
Well, I don't think there's any big difference now between the Europeans, Zelensky, and Trump. The question is, where are the Russians on this deal?
Right.
And my guess is there's some difference, and that Trump is much more confident that Putin is going to go along with this.
Right.
And they probably don't have a full understanding of what they will do if this deal breaks down.
Right.
I just mentioned two models. Let's think about, from historical experience, what's the likely outcome of this? I don't think it's peace and comity between Russia and Ukraine. That seems to me unlikely. But various kinds of truces, armistices, cessation of hostility. So again, we haven't talked about this time. What we've seen in Korea since 1953, which is they're still at war, but they're not actively killing each other every day. You could see that. Or, and I always go back to this, 1939, didn't get a lot of publicity back then, wasn't on your show. Russia tries to take Ukraine and pull it back into the Soviet Empire in the Winter War of 1939. How does that come out? Finland loses about 10% of its land area, an important part of its land area, Karelia, that was very important. But they retain their independence, more or less, right? That's important. Now, in a way, Putin wants to do something similar in that we used to say, Mark, you'll remember this, that a country has been Finlandized, meaning it didn't have total freedom.
Right.
Putin would like Ukraine to be absolutely neutral. I think the NATO argument is sort of moot for the following reason. Imagine a vote to bring Ukraine into NATO. Do you think Hungary would vote for it? No. You think Turkey would vote for it? No. I'm not sure Germany would vote for it. And you have to have unanimity for a country to accede to NATO. So NATO can't say, we will never even look at an application, because NATO is a defensive alliance of free nations. But we all know Ukraine wasn't going to and will not be in NATO anytime soon. So a Finland-like cessation of hostilities, armistice, seems to me a possibility if Putin is willing. He may be or he may not be. One reason he may is, depending on how healthy he feels, he may think, you know what, 3 more years, I won't have Trump in the White House. I'll give him that. I won't do anything more on his watch. But when it's President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who knows what I might do.
Right. Okay. One more point, and then we're going to get to questions. Europe. It seems to me this is also a little under commented on. For so much of during the Cold War and afterwards, in dealing with Putin, American presidents have been bedeviled by the French and the Germans in particular, being addicted to Russian energy and having to constantly worry that if you tried to sanction Russia, the Europeans would be dovish and it wouldn't work. It seems to me, again, under commented on, that's flipped now, right? The Europeans are in Washington in part to make sure that the president's not too pro-Russia. And so if we get to the point where Zelensky says yes and Putin says no, and the president's forced to put on decides I'm going to do these tough sanctions like in the Senate bill, it seems like the Europeans will go along with that, or they'll flip back because they'll be back to being addicted to the energy. Dad.
I think there's a chance that they will go along with that if Trump goes along with guaranteeing the necessary military equipment to Ukraine, regardless of who pays for it. The key is for us to allow things that only we can produce to be used by the Ukrainians anywhere they want to within Russia.
So if Trump says you can buy all the weapons you need from us, but you got to go along with sanctions, so the Europeans would agree to that.
And you have to, and he lets them use them anywhere against Russia.
Yeah,
those are the critical points.
Cliff,
I think you could have a deal.
Yeah, Cliff, that'd be horrible for Putin, so much so that he might then have to go back and accept the deal, right?
If there are serious sanctions, there are cards to play, and Europe could play more of them. But Europe is much stronger if they are sanctioning along with the U.S. Keep in mind the Europeans have right now $300 billion, mostly in Belgian banks, of seized Russian money, which I would argue they should be very quickly using to rearm Ukraine and for reparations. They should not be delaying because, well, international law says no, they can figure out a way to do this. I'd like to see Trump pushing them to do this. The Europeans recognize, I think, very clearly that this is the wolf at their door. They recognize that if Putin succeeds, he has more on his to-do list than just Ukraine. He is right now, look, he took in 2008 two territories away from Georgia, and he is the Georgian government is now becoming a vassal like Belarus of Russia. Right now, it's in bad shape. He is interfering, meddling very badly in Moldova, and he has a strip of land that's essentially a Russian colony on the east of Moldova. It's called Transnistria. So they say, and believe me, I've talked to the ambassadors of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Don't forget, the Soviet Union took over Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in 1940. The U.S. never recognized that. They regained their independence the same time Ukraine did, the same time Georgia did, the same time Moldova did. Putin is not happy with any of that. His aim is to restore the Russian/Soviet Empire. He has erected statues to Stalin around the country, including in the Moscow metro. He admires Stalin not because Stalin was a communist, but because Stalin expanded the Russian/Soviet Empire to the largest it had ever been because it included the satellites of Eastern and Central Europe. This is Putin's psychology. This is who he is, and I hope that President Trump is getting to understand who he is. He's not a man who wants peace. He's a man who wants victory and who wants to expand, restore the Russian/Soviet Empire.
All right, we're going to do a quick word from our other sponsor this evening, Indeed, and then we're going to take your questions for Dr. Halperin and Cliff May. So if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. Our other sponsor tonight is Indeed. If you're trying to hire right now, you know that hiring is annoying but essential. You want to make sure you hire the right people as quick as possible so you can stop struggling to get your job site seen by posting them in the wrong place. Put them in Indeed using their sponsored job feature. Sponsored jobs, jump right to the top of the page, find the relevant candidates quickly. You can reach the people you need to reach, you want to reach faster. It makes a huge difference. Indeed data says sponsored jobs have a 45% more, yield 45% more applications that are the right kind than the non-sponsored jobs. No reason to wait any longer. You want to hire right now with Indeed. Listeners to this program, listen carefully, $75 off with a sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility. Go to Indeed.com/two-way for your $75 sponsored job credit. Go to Indeed.com/two-way right now. Tell them you heard about it on this program. Indeed.com/two-way. Terms and conditions apply. Indeed, if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, folks, welcome in. As always, unmute. Tell folks where you are and what is on your mind. For Mr. May and Mr. Halperin, we'll start with Lee. Lee, unmute, please. Tell us where you are, what's on your mind.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me. I'm in Southwest Ohio, and yeah, I've been waiting for Dad to be on the call. I had a few questions for him, so it's a thrill to talk to you guys.
Dig right in, sir.
I'm curious, your historical perspective on, is it important to have general support for the president, from Democrats and Republicans in the Congress? It seems like in today's environment, they criticize the meeting, they criticize Trump's approach. And I thought that historically, that sort of thing we like to have end at our shores. So,
Yeah.
is this different, the way that, people criticize Trump versus when Nixon was trying to solve Vietnam or Bush or those sorts of things?
Yeah. Great question, Lee. Dad.
Well, I think we've drifted very far away from bipartisanship, and we've drifted very far away from what I think the Constitution requires, which is cooperation of the Congress with the president in authorizing the use of military force. So I would hope that the president next move will be to call in the congressional leadership, Democrats as well as Republicans, and ask for their endorsement and support for the key elements of this program. Endorsement of the use of the Soviet Russian assets, endorsement of providing American military aid, providing a substantial amount for it that Congress would appropriate the funds for, but providing the rest, the authority to the president to let other countries give aid to the Ukrainians that they can use, and accept a role in advising the president and participating in the negotiation. I think the Democrats are ready for this. I hope the president is, because I think we should not be making these commitments without them being bipartisan and without them having the approval of the Congress as well as the president.
Cliff, my dad is one of the most idealistic people I know. If he calls Chuck Schumer in to ask his opinion, I'll be shocked and delighted. Cliff, what do you think of Lee's question about where we stand on bipartisanship?
Actually, I think Ukraine is an issue on which we have substantial bipartisanship. There is
Yeah.
a very vocal wing of the Republican Party, the Tucker Carlson types and others, the isolationists, the restrainers, who are for reasons I don't entirely understand, very anti-Ukraine and very sympathetic towards Putin. I think they misunderstand him. But the most Republicans are not there, and we know that because of polls done by both the Reagan Institute back in December and more recently by the Vandenberg Coalition, which showed most Republicans, most Trump voters, most those self-identified as MAGA, want to see Ukraine retain its independence, its freedom, its sovereignty, and do understand that Putin is very much the predator and Ukraine is the prey, and actually want the U.S. to maintain a leadership role in the world, not fade back and allow other hostile nations to take that role. So I think there really is an opportunity for bipartisanship here, much more so than in a lot of other conflicts, such as the Middle East.
Lee, before you ask your second question, I'll just say I agree with what both of them said. It'd be great if the president did that, but unfortunately, because of the polarized nature of our politics, if the president did what a president 50 years ago or 30 years ago might have done, call the four leaders in, bipartisan leaders, all of whom probably support this, and stood in the White House and said, America stands unified. You can only imagine the reaction on the left and the right. How could you stand with Donald Trump, the Democrats would say, and they'd say the president, how could you stand with these horrible people? So it's really unfortunate because, as both Cliff and my dad have said, I think there'd be a lot of support for it, and for the same reasons, the same reasons of standing up to Putin and America's role. And I think if this plan succeeds, the president and his advisors have come up with something very elegant to kind of avoid the MAGA and the Sanders objection. How are you spending American taxpayers' money to support Ukraine after we've spent all this money? Well, we're not spending it. We're selling it to the Ukrainians and the Europeans. And how could you risk America being involved in an endless war? No, the Germans, the British and the French are doing it, and we're trying to keep it from being an endless war. Very elegant and with bipartisan support, but unfortunately, I think we're unlikely to see it. Lee, second question.
Yeah, the second one is just a personal interest to me. I'm curious if you have any memories or opinions about this guy, George Aiken, who was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from Vermont.
Sure. He was the solution to the Vietnam War, which was to declare victory and get out, which is what we actually did. It was called Vietnamization, the strangest word for a war that was entirely in Vietnam and had been for 30 years, to call it, we're going to Vietnamize the war. But that's what we did. We said, we're going to stop fighting. We're going to let the Vietnamese fight. And if they can beat the North Vietnamese, they have their country. And if they can't, we can't stay forever to do it. So we adopted Aiken's policy, declare victory, claim our forces accomplished their purpose, and we got out.
Did you ever meet Aiken?
I did meet him. I didn't know him well.
Okay. Cliff May.
I didn't meet Aiken.
Yeah. All right. Lee, thank you for the two great questions. Grateful to you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's bring in someone else here. Let's bring in Max. Max, thank you for being part of Two-Way. Unmute. Hold on. There you go. Unmute. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind for Dr. Morton H. Halperin and Cliff May.
Yes, still in Como, back at the end of the week. Listening to everyone and the coverage here from Italy and you all. I'm a little bit remiss to hear everyone beating the same drum about Putin's aggression. I don't understand how we've forgotten that our former vice president, who was running for president of the United States, stated that Ukraine was going to join NATO. That's a red line in Russians' history for about 1,000 years. James Baker in 1991 swore that NATO would have moved 1 inch east. Last time I checked, we've been the only ones that moved east, and Russia hasn't moved west. So I'd like to understand how you all talk about his aggression, whereas we've marched, 1,500 miles east. So it's a little bit remiss,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Max, I don't know if you speak for tens of millions, but you do speak for millions in the United States who share that point of view. Cliff.
And also one last thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No American troops. All three networks, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, all beating the drum of security guarantees using American troops. And that's a non-starter.
Yeah. You mean for the American people or for the president or
For the American people?
Yeah.
I think he won on ending endless wars.
Yeah. Cliff.
Look, I got to tell you, NATO is a purely defensive alliance. Putin is a smart guy, whatever you want to say about him. He didn't think, oh, I am worried any day now there will be Dutch and Danish and Belgian troops marching across my borders and they're going to take Moscow. He didn't think that. It is an alliance, a defensive alliance of free nations. No question. It's not a matter of security for Putin. He's not afraid of Ukraine. But I will tell you this: he doesn't like the idea of a nation. And remember what he wrote in 2021. He essentially says that Ukrainians are really just rogue Russians living in the hinterlands, and they shouldn't be speaking that funny language. They should be speaking Russians like proper people. And he didn't like that they became a fledgling democracy. He doesn't, because he has a dictatorship. I was there as an election observer for the last elections in Ukraine, parliamentary elections. People were so proud that they had political parties that differed greatly. Some were more pro-Russian, some were less so. They had free press, and they were following election procedures. They were saying we can be a free democratic nation. Putin does not want that on his border. But the notion that he was afraid of NATO, afraid of Ukraine, afraid of Latvia, Estonia, that you got to tell you, Max, that's simply not the case. NATO doesn't move east. NATO says to a free nation, if you want to apply to join, you may, but every member has to agree.
All right,
there was never a point,
okay.
never, I don't care what Kamala may have said, where it was possible that Ukraine would have been voted by unanimously into NATO. There has never been that moment in history.
All right, Cliff, hold on. Mort and then Max again.
So I share some of these concerns. I was against NATO expansion. I thought it was a fundamental mistake. There was no sign of Russia planning to use military force. We always could have gone back to it if we needed to go back to it. We were building something called the Partnership for Peace, which involved inviting into a NATO structure all of the countries of Europe, including Russia. And I think we abandoned that possibility far too soon. Now, I agree. I don't think Putin thought that we were going to invade Russia, but I did think that he thought we were going to move countries, former parts of the Soviet Union, into an American orbit, and that he did have concerns about that. It doesn't justify what he's done, But I think we could have handled the situation in a way that made it more likely that we would not have this kind of confrontation uh, with the Russians. But I think we're where we are now. I agree. We're not going to send American troops, but we have not committed, and NATO is not committed not to having American troops in every NATO country. And we know, of course, as a result of what the Russians did in Ukraine, there are now several more NATO countries and countries where the Russians really worry about American troops in those countries. So I think that is a card we have to play, and that we should be willing to play. We should be willing to do what we thought we had done under Baker, but turned out not to do, which is to make certain commitments informally about limits of NATO troop deployments, limits of NATO policies in a way that take account of Russian concerns.
Max.
Yeah, I agree with your father on many of his points. Quickly on that, the one thing I would say to Cliff, he's definitely not afraid of the Dutch. I don't know anyone who's afraid of the Dutch.
I'm afraid of Johan Cruyff on the soccer field, but that's
on the soccer field.
Some big guys.
But I don't like the thought of if you're in a club and it's like me. I have a bunch of cousins, and if you messed with one of my cousins, you'd mess with me. And the United States is that big cousin that Putin definitely would look leery at.
Yeah.
And finally, I think of Bill Clinton often during these conversations, who stated that Putin never lied to him in any of the deals that he made.
Yeah.
He is a shrewd guy. I think that us pushing Russia away towards China is not a good thing, especially when it comes to energy.
Yeah, Max, thank you. Bill Clinton was the architect of the Partnerships for Peace, which my dad mentioned, which was meant to split the difference. And I have to say, no one I've read has looked at the alternative history, which is we ended up with Putin incredibly empowered and doing what he's done in Ukraine, but also, as Cliff pointed out, making mischief elsewhere in Europe. And I'd be interesting to see the counterfactual. Had there been more of an emphasis on my father's point of view of doing things to minimize Putin at least having a pretext of feeling threatened, would things have gone differently? Would he be as empowered as he is now? Two pieces of international news. First, on the Middle East, about an hour ago.
You don't have any sound, at least not from me.
You can't hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. Hamas agreed to a ceasefire this afternoon, and an hour later, Israeli tanks have started entering Gaza City. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Now here's some news from the meeting at the White House. Okay, so hot mics. I got to say, it's incredible to me that politicians still get caught speaking on hot mics. You learn this in the news business. Every mic can be on. Every mic can be on. So here's what the president was heard saying to Macron. He says, quote, Putin wants to make a deal for me, as crazy as it sounds. And again, that'll be picked over quite a bit. Cliff, which of these European leaders do you think, if any of them, or the NATO leaders, like who's driving all this unity? This is an extraordinary display, not just, as I said before, about hawking the United States to some degree vis-a-vis Russia, but this is an extraordinary amount of unity, right?
Yes, I give a lot of credit actually to the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Yeah.
I think he has proven himself to be very adept, very good at very persuasive with President Trump. I think he has President Trump's confidence. I think he's good. I think the Italians probably also have some influence. I think Macron much less. Starmer, some. British Prime Minister I'm talking about.
Yeah. Dad, what do you think?
I haven't followed that particularly closely. I think Trump scared them, I think. And I think they decided they had to be serious, as they're finally becoming serious about having an essential military capability. The European Union is larger than Russia.
Yeah.
And if it wanted to have a military capability that could take on Russia, it could do so. And it's never been willing to do that. And I
Moving
think
way
Trump,
too slowly.
Yeah.
now it's moving slowly. I think Trump scared them. They
Yeah.
realized they could wake up
Yeah.
one morning and the Americans would in fact be gone.
I'll tell you the other person who I think scared him is J.D. Vance with that speech. I think they really has focused their mind to say these guys will walk away, but they'll stay if we have an accommodation to the America First sensibility.
I think they're beginning to realize America stays if they are good partners and contributing to the collective security. America will not stay if we're dependents with a sense of entitlement.
That's right, and a failure to be realistic. These decades of saying, please protect us from the Russians, please protect us, but we're not going to live up to our NATO obligations, and we're not going to have societies that are really focused on being adults. Just being the junior partners. All right, Jack, welcome in. Thank you for being part of Two Way. What's on your mind for Dr. Halperin and Cliff? After you unmute.
Mute here. All right. Yes, great panel today. Considering how our defense industrial establishment has withered over the last 30 years, I'm concerned about our ability to meet some of the goals we've been stating for, of course, Ukraine, and to a lesser extent, Israel. As recently as the beginning of the Trump administration, they were saying it would take us 2 years just to backfill some of the Patriot missiles because the manufacturing lines are just shut down. I'm wondering what you think about that aspect of this.
Jack, before they answer, and Dad, you'll go first. The president has left the meeting with the European leaders and Zelensky to call Putin. So we'll see what comes out.
You can invite him to dessert.
Maybe. So ask him if he has a Zoom password. Dad, thoughts on Jack's question?
The one that I'm most worried about is one that was mentioned before, and that's Taiwan, because the Chinese are a much more serious military power than the Russians are, and the military situation surrounding Taiwan is much more dangerous, much harder to defend. But I think that the general problem is as you've described it, but I worry in the future about Taiwan much more. I don't see any way out of that. I think there is a way out of the other situation.
Cliff.
So, Jack, I think you're 100% right. One of the things that I think we should be indebted to the Ukrainians for is giving us a wake-up call that our defense industrial base was sclerotic and diminished and was nowhere near where it needs to be. Some correction of that is taking place, not as fast as it should, but it's also difficult to do. You're talking about training workers, establishing factories. By the way, if we sell arms to NATO to give to Ukraine, that's good, because if you want to increase your defense industrial base, you have to tell the suppliers, here, we're going to buy a lot over a period of years, so it pays for you to invest in this. That's what has to happen. Also, Ukraine is developing its defense industrial base. That's very useful for us. We should also push all our European allies to do the same in order to do it quicker. And keep in mind that it's also very important for us to see how our weapons actually work in battle. And we have been, thanks to the Ukrainians, and that we're also learning from the Ukrainians, because a lot of what they're doing, say with drones, is remarkable, innovative, and very important for future conflicts.
Jack, thank you. Grateful to you. Ask you both something that I talked about this morning that I'm confused by. Where's the talk of European and American economic ties to Ukraine? Because Putin is almost as threatened by their integration into the EU as an economic partner as he is by their integration into NATO. So why is that being discussed more? Is that because they don't want to inflame Putin, or they don't want to help reconstruct Ukraine? Where's that conversation? Dad?
Well, I suspect that it's going on, and I don't see any barriers. I think there will be reconstruction efforts for Ukraine that I think the Congress will want to participate in, and that I think the president will ultimately decide that that's the right thing to do. I think it's just too soon. This has all happened in 3 days, and of course, it all could turn out not to be true.
Yeah.
Trump could come back from the phone call and say, "Oh, Trump says
Putin.
No. Putin says no way will he agree to any of this."
Yeah. Cliff.
So we do have a critical minerals deal with Ukraine,
Right.
which was an important thing.
Yeah.
Two, Ukraine is important economically, not least as a breadbasket for the world, for Africa, for a lot of other places. We want to see that happen. Three, there's huge amounts of reconstruction. That's one of the reasons that I'd like to see the frozen Russian assets used for that, especially if Putin proves very stubborn about what kind of deal he's willing to accept for a ceasefire or for a partial peace. And then I also think one of the things that'd be worth saying, I don't think we have specifically, is anybody who is helping to fund Putin's war machine shouldn't be involved in reconstructing Ukraine after. That should be only for the U.S. and its allies who have helped to bring about a resolution to this most terrible conflict since World War II in Europe.
There's been some debate about the legality of using those Russian funds to help Ukraine.
There is,
but I think the preponderance of view is there's a precedent for it. I think so.
I think so. You talk. Look, Russia is committing war crimes every day.
Yeah.
So it's to clutch our pearls and say, how can we possibly utilize their funds for what?
Why hasn't it happened?
I think from what I understand, the Belgians, whose banks a lot of this is, they're worried about it. They want to say, you put money in our banks. I don't care who you are, terrorist, tyrant. We'll always protect your money. That's the kind of people we are. I think that's shameful if that's what they're doing. You can be a little bit too, prudish about it. You can find a way to do this under international law, but the Europeans can be difficult. But it's one of the things the Europeans can do. And there's only so many things the Europeans can do besides making their various arguments. Again, they can't do sanctions the way the U.S. can do, and they certainly can't do without the U.S. help. So here's something they can actually do and provide. And by the way, they don't want to provide $300 billion. And Trump's saying you do provide that whatever the money is needed to buy these weapons. Do not expect us to simply give them away. That's not how it's going to work here. So they should get serious about this and figure out a way to solve this problem with Belgium, or France, or whoever is in.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So we don't know what's going to happen. The meetings have broken up, and again, the president is supposed to be calling Putin. Dad, what are you looking for in the day and days ahead?
Well, the critical thing is whether the Russians make clear that they are prepared to accept the presence of military forces from NATO member countries in Ukraine, and that the Ukrainians make clear that if that is done and other things are done, that they are prepared to yield some territory that's under their control, which seems to me has to be their decision entirely. I would be very strongly opposed to the United States or the Europeans trying to bludgeon a democratically elected government to do something that violates the fundamental principles of the world order that we built since World War II. The UN was built on the principle of no acquisition of territory by the use or the threat of the use of force. And having the Ukrainians give up territory that they control and either forcing the people to leave or leaving them under Russian control is a very hard pill to swallow. And I think we need to understand that. And then it needs to be, if it's up to the Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians think it's the only way they can get peace and they decide they want to do it, then I think it's our obligation to make sure that the rest of it is met, that they do have the funds for reconstruction, that they do have security guarantees, which are real for the rest of their country. And so that they don't regret, and we don't regret going down this road 10 years from now.
Cliff, what are you looking for?
I would hope that Trump says to Putin, look, guy, you're going to retain Crimea. I'm not going to say I'm going to recognize it under law. I can't do that. You're going to retain everything you conquered. It's a matter of it's realistic. Again, de facto, not de jure. I'm not going to recognize it. But you get to keep the land bridge to Crimea. That's really important for you for a lot of reasons. You're going to keep that in. But don't ask for more than that. Don't ask for lands you haven't conquered. Don't ask for the fortress belt, which will make Ukraine vulnerable for a minor incursion in the future. That's gone too far. But do it this way. again, we're going to kind of freeze a conflict, and you'll get that, and then you're going to have good relations with us again, and good relations with the Europeans again. We can work on all that stuff once once the killing stops. I've been telling you for a long time. The First Lady's been telling you for a long time. Don't want you bombing nurseries, old age homes, apartment buildings. We want that to stop. And you can say to your hardliners, look, I got a big piece of Ukraine, and who knows what happens in the future. And let's leave it there, and you win and I win. Let's leave it there. I don't know that Putin takes that. He might. His economy, we haven't talked about this, his economy is in much worse shape than I think most people realize or that he concedes. Inflation is huge. War spending is huge. And if, by the way, this is just a really important point. If Trump makes it clear to Putin, if you don't accept this, I am going to continue to supply munitions, including, I'm sorry to say, long-range missiles. And unlike Biden, I'm not going to restrict their use only for Ukrainian territory. They're going to hit military targets inside Russia, just because you're hitting civilian targets inside Ukraine. So you don't want to go down this road. You and I want to get along, and getting along means the war stops.
Yeah, let me just make one point on that.
Yeah.
I agree we should try that. What I fear is that Putin is already expecting it to get that concession from Trump, and that Trump has told him, as Trump has talked about, giving up territory where you.
But I don't think he went into Anchorage freelancing. He talked to Putin. He talked to Zelensky and the Europeans on Wednesday. You think he didn't tell him he was going to say that?
I think he told him he was going to say it. It's not clear that they agreed that he should say it.
Yeah.
But if the Europeans and the Ukrainians are ready to go along with it, then it's not our job to prolong the war by saying, no, let's press the Russians for this other position.
Yeah.
If the Ukrainians are not willing to accept giving up territory that they now hold, then my view is we can't and should not press them to do it. But I think we're past that, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Putin has 20% of Ukraine right now, roughly.
All right. That's more than enough.
That's more than enough. Morton, I are exactly right. That's more than enough. And by the way, he's moving forward literally by inches and paving every inch with bodies.
Right.
Because it's not so.
But neither of us
would take years to do anything else. As long as he doesn't get rid of the fortress belt, because that would be a way of disarming. And he can't insist that Ukraine be disarmed. On the contrary, if there is a cessation of hostilities, Russia will rebuild its military, and it needs to do so, rebuild its economy. So will Ukraine. Make Ukraine a porcupine, hard for a predator to digest in the future. We should have done that a long time ago, I would argue.
Yeah. I will say, and I'm not giving my credit to myself, I'm giving credit to all of you. We say two-way conversations like no other. There's not an hour on cable news you've heard like this. These two extraordinary thinkers and explainers, and no shouting, no partisanship, and the guests from all of you in the two-way community, better than any questions I heard in a cable network news anchor asked today. So I couldn't have enjoyed the hour more and learned more, and so grateful, Dad, to you and Cliff, you two coming back, and grateful to all you in the two-way community. I'll be back with Sean and Dan tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, a morning meeting. There'll be plenty more to talk about then in this show. We'll be back 6 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. Thank you all for watching again. Dad and Cliff, thank you. We'll see you at 9 a.m.
My pleasure. Honor to be with you, Mark.
Bye.